So, Joe Robert Cole, congratulations on receiving your very first Emmy nomination for writing an episode of The People versus O.J. Simpson entitled "The Race Card." I want to start off just by asking, where were you when you got the news you had been nominated, and how did it feel?
Well, I'll switch the order. It felt amazing. Like nothing I've ever felt in my life. Still walking on air a little bit. I was here in my office. When I'm writing, I sometimes turn off my phone and don't look at my emails. And that morning, I happened to be doing that, and so I actually was very late to the game. I happened to be going online to do some research, and my internet came up and my Gmail account, and a ton of emails, and I started looking at them, and I was like, oh yeah, today's the day. I bet we got a nomination. And then I started clicking them, and I soon realized that I was fortunate enough to be nominated as well as the show. And then I turned on my phone, and I had, lo and behold, I missed a bunch of calls, and so it was very, very exciting late morning, early afternoon for me.
Well, you guys got 22 nominations, and 3 of them were for writing. So it really shows off the amount of love that the TV Academy had for this, for one thing. But I think also the fact that you guys got so many nominations really highlights the team effort that this was. Yeah. Tell us about the episode you nominated for, The Race Card. It was one of 2 that you wrote for the show overall, the other one being A Jury in Jail. How did you get assigned these 2 episodes?
Well, it's the Race Card one is it's kind of a funny story. So I was reading before the writers' room started. I was rereading Tubin's book. I was reading Tubin's book for the first time, and as I'm reading the inward debate scene, and I'm riveted by the scene, and I'm going along, and I got to the button on the scene, Johnny's line at the end of the scene, and I literally jumped up like I was at a football game. I almost fell out of my chair because I was so shocked that actually said between lawyers in a courtroom. So when we finally got into the writer's room, everyone's kicking around ideas of things that they read in the various books that we thought might be interesting to incorporate into the show. And I feel like I just blurted out, the nigga please moment has got to be in the show, and probably made a fool of myself. But in doing that, I think I planted kind of a flag for that moment, and I honestly think that scene couldn't exist in any other episode, but this one. And so as the episode started to kind of shift out, it was pretty organic. It was the Race Card was the first episode that I was assigned, that I was asked to write, and it was my first episode of television I wrote.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, it's first episode. Yeah, and then and then the juror episode, I found the jury fascinating. Everyone, I think Larry likes to say that everyone was the star of their own movie that was involved in the case, and so everyone wrote a book, and that included quite a few of the jurors, and so I was drawn to just trying to understand from their perspective where they were coming from, and ended up reading all the juror books, and found myself, found that I had quite a bit of sympathy for them. After reading and realizing what they went through, I think at the time, it was the longest sequestration in American history. From selection through the verdict was a year. So these people were on one floor of a hotel room, of a hotel for 1 year with people they did not know, and some of which they did not like. Everyone on the outside was talking about the trial that they were at the center of, and they could not, they were prohibited from talking about it, prohibited from seeing their family except for conjugal visits. So some serious cabin fever set in, and there was the petty bickering, the things that happen when you're stuck in a place with people, and some of it was just absurd. The reason lots of them were getting kicked off was, you know, these bizarre kind of scenarios, so that was fascinating to me. And then also just this idea that I think when the verdict was read, I think a majority of people immediately blamed the jury for the verdict, saying, oh, they were blind to all of the information, the facts. And what you don't realize is, one, that they weren't watching cable news every day. So they only got this very small sliver of information that the vast majority of the public did not get. And in addition to that, they, you know, at least the black jurors specifically, who are many of them from South Central LA or Inglewood, black neighborhoods, have a different life perspective and a different view on police based on their life experience. So, you know, these are people coming from a community where they are used to hearing about police framing people, police, you know, planting evidence, police being racist. And so when the defense put forward that argument, it's much easier for them to digest it and believe it to be possible, because it's a part of their life experience, than if you're from an area or a place where you haven't had that experience. So I just thought that I found the jury very fascinating in terms of, like, it's the one element of the show that I think was, or of the case, more likely, that I think we didn't get under the skin of, because you really couldn't, you know, so.
Right. Yeah. In a weird way. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry.
No, I was going to say, it occurred to me as I was listening to you talk about this, in a weird way, these two episodes sort of complement each other, wouldn't you say? Because, I mean, the race card sets up what's going to be in the minds of the jury later on, you know, because race is such a huge part of this trial.
Yeah, you know, I think they do complement each other. I think Scott and Larry did a fantastic job setting out the bones of what the show would be, so that every episode complements every episode in a way.
Right, yeah.
But I think those two episodes do go hand in hand in a way, episode 5 and episode 8, in just trying to understand the black perspective on the case. And I think what we were trying to do, and something I commend everyone from top to bottom with who's involved with the show, is try to show the 360 of perspective, to really try to get under the skin of all of the different perspectives in surrounding the trial and the verdict, so that we could find this place of empathy between, you know, regardless of whether you felt he was guilty or innocent, but at least you can understand where someone who felt differently at that time was coming from. And so I think that was something that we all set out to try to do. And I think those two episodes, I think I was trying to put forward a authentic and kind of a complex and grounded depiction of the experience of all the people involved in the trial. But I think they specifically offered up perspective for African Americans.
Absolutely. And there are so many different layers to every episode of this show. Not just race, but also sexism, cable news you brought up, the 24-hour news cycle, criminal justice system, the nature of celebrity with O.J. Simpson. Yeah. There's a lot to work with as a writer. So let's talk about, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, let's talk about writing the race card a little more specifically, structuring that episode.
Well, I mean, when we're in the room, I think we talked through. We would go through each episode, and there was, like I said, Scott and Larry had a skeleton of what the episodes would be, what they would like them to be as a starting point for us. We sat in the room. We all read. I probably read close to 10 books in research, just in general. We would throw out different ideas, kind of figure out whose episode it would be. We really tried to, focus in terms of the episode 5. At least me personally, as a whole, as a room, we wanted to kind of tackle this idea that African Americans are monolithic, that we all think alike. And so the episode, ultimately ended up being trying to show these 3 different perspectives of 3 different African American men, and they all view the world differently. And so thematically, I think once we kind of understood what that was, and then you're working within the bounds of what happens in the trial and the timeline, you try to find scenes that accentuate the thematic that you want to work through, that can kind of show, an example is just kind of the juxtaposition of a good example would be like the juxtaposition of Johnny at the church in the beginning, and then we see Dalton in the room with all the lawyers, kind of stuck, basically being painted as something that he wasn't. Using how race was used to vilify him or to corner him and alienate him from the community that many of the jurors came from, and kind of nullify the prosecution's attempt to put a black face on the team to help with that jury. Kind of playing that. And then you can juxtaposition the Johnny scene in the church with Dominic Dunn's dinner party scene. So you couldn't get any further away from each other in terms of perspectives on the trial, because by this moment in the trial, the city had polarized based on race. People picked their sides, and so we just tried to find different ways of accentuating how race is manipulated, how it was used in the case, how the perspectives of the various players, with race as the kind of center of gravity. In the Dominic Dunn scene, when the black waiter comes in, it's that same feeling. If you think about Darden, it's that same feeling of other, and we really just tried to find places to try to find scenes and build scenes that accentuated that. And so we kind of set up some of those ideas. Then I went away and kind of broke it out, presented it, and you get notes, and people tell you what doesn't work and what does, and you refine it.
Well, I thought it was interesting how you began the episode also with Johnny being pulled over by the police some years earlier with his daughters. I mean, here's a man who is a millionaire. He's a high-priced attorney, and he can't drive through Beverly Hills without being stopped. And it really gives you some context into where he might be coming from in terms of the trial. Like, it's not just a ploy for him to use the race card, shall we say.
Yeah, I mean, that's many wealthier African Americans have stories of being pulled over, of being profiled. It happens. It's happened to me. I got here's a funny. Yeah, it's happened to me many times. But here's a great. So during production, I live in Culver City, and we were at Fox, so I would drive up Motor, and I got followed by a police car from the bottom of Motor near Sony all the way up to until I pulled into Fox.
Oh my God!
Police car would go around people just to follow me until I went into, and I was coming to actually work on the show. So I came into, we had a story meeting. I walked in, I was like, guys, guess what just happened? I just got followed. It was like this great. you know, I mean, you know, it's a fact of, it's a part of the world we live in, and it does affect how you see police, how you interact with police. And I'm certain, you know, among other things, I mean, Johnny spent his entire career kind of fighting against racism in police, overreach and brutality in the LAPD, of which there was a lot. But when you have that personal experience, it does stay with you. It stays with you. I remember when I was in college, a cop came to my car with his gun drawn, and I was,
oh my
you know,
God.
I went to Berkeley. And so here I am, a Berkeley student, and the cops come to my car. You know, I got a ticket for changing lanes without putting my blinker on Sunday morning, 9 a.m.
That's absurd. Wow.
Yeah, but so, you know, you're kind of going, okay, so what that does is it helps you to contextualize his plight in terms of like how he's, you know, why he's a dog with a bone, you know, with regards to why it's personal to him, how humiliating it was for him to be with his daughters, and to see, you know, he's so accomplished and yet he could be reduced to that. Yeah, so I mean, that's what we're going for, just trying to, you know, kind of place and again create that empathy for you know, where each of the characters are coming from.
Right, absolutely. So when you were writing it, you did a lot of research, and obviously you have certain facts that you have to get across, but how much of it is, let's say, writer's invention? You know, obviously there's no way to know exactly what was said in certain rooms at certain times, but how much of that is your own imaginings of things?
Well, it's a little bit of both. I mean, right. For the court, you know, from the courtroom scenes, you know, I love to take a look at the transcripts. This idea of truth being stranger than fiction really applies, right? So the lawyers on each side also obviously took a lot of care in their word choice for the case, and so there was just some great stuff in there to use. And so you know, with those sequences, you would, you know, I would, you know, you'd find some relevant stuff that made sense, and you subtract and add language to it to make it right, and play with it and invent when you needed to. The scenes outside, you know, you read the books. Some of that stuff was referenced in terms of the books. Old conversations were like this or like that, but you really just play with it. You use it as a starting point. You try to capture the tone, feel of it, and then you have, you know, other obligations within the scene, character obligations, plot obligations that you need to focus on. And so, but it was the amount of research was fantastic because there was so much there. It was such rich material to work from. I think probably the biggest invention from episode 5 was Hodgman's heart attack happening in the courtroom, which also was probably one of my favorite moments on set, because one, Christian did a fantastic job. It looked real. There was one take though where John called cut, and John Travolta jumps up and bolts across the courtroom and goes, "There's a doctor in the house." So then you have like, I don't know, 3 or 4 minutes of like these fantastic actors playing off each other, pretending, you know, improvising as if he really had a heart attack. And it was just a delightful time. But in actuality, Hodgman started to have heart palpitations after in an office, and the paramedics called at that point. But that would not have been nearly as dramatic as seeing him collect.
Right. So you bring up John Singleton. I was going to ask, did you two have much collaboration? He directed the episode. Did you two have much collaboration on that? And what was that like?
It was great. John was amazing. You know, we talked about each scene, and, you know, I supervised the episode, so I was there with him on set, and we would talk and things. You know, he had a real great vision for the episode. And you know, he being from LA, he had a really great understanding of LAPD, how that relates to race, how that relates to celebrity. He poured his heart and soul into it. He really loved, you know, in reading the draft, he really loved it. And you could just tell that he wanted, you know, he really wanted to make the best episode possible. And I think he did a fantastic job. I don't think was a better director to do the episode than him. And I think he did great.
I agree with you. So I wanted to talk to you a bit about the ending of the episode, because that's really fascinating as well, where Cochran remakes, shall we say, OJ's home for the jury to come and look at it. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I read that was referenced in 2 or 3, maybe more of the books that I read research-wise, and depending on the author, it was, you know, either painted as, you know, the worst racial pandering, or the fantastic lawyering, however you put it. But there were a new tidbits of what was changed and which was switched around in every account. That, again, it was another one of these moments, and there were many with the show, where I would just sit there stunned and go, that could not have really happened. Like, I could not believe that he went in there and he literally transformed this guy's house with the Bibles and you know, the grandmother in the wheelchair. He took Paula Barbier's nude photo down and put a picture of OJ's mom up with the wheelchair. I mean, it's like that. You can't make that up. And so the idea of it was another one of those moments where that has to be in the show. You can't not have that in the episode. One, because it really speaks to the racial dynamic and what Johnny understood, that I think Marcia, whose heart was always in the right place and completely was just a public servant trying to do the right thing, was extremely admirable, and wanted race not to matter because it shouldn't. What Johnny understood was it does. And even if it shouldn't, it does. And I'm going to use that to any advantage I can for this larger cause that I'm fighting for, you know. And so, you know, the fact that he was able to use that and manipulate the jury into having a comfort level with OJ that maybe they weren't even aware that they would, you know, that they would have, was really, really, as cynical as it was very, very smart.
Mm-hmm. So can you talk a bit about the social relevance of this story to today? I mean, there's no way of knowing when you guys were making this, when you were conceiving of it, that so much of it, this trial from 20 years ago, was going to echo today. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, you know, you have no idea. You're right. You have no idea. You're dealing with an issue that has not gone away. You understand that there is still tension between African Americans, specifically African American men, and police. And so when you're focused on the show, I think that's why it was such a smart idea to start with Rodney King and the LA riots, to put in context how the OJ trial was seen, like in the context at which it landed. There is something profoundly sad about how relevant it still is today. But on the flip side, there is progress that we see that has occurred. We have a Black president. I think also the comfort level between African American culture and African Americans with people who with white America as a whole is much broader now than it was at that time. So I think, as much as it is relevant, I think the show happening now allows, I think, some clarity in vision and from all sides to what was happening then and what was happening and what is happening now. I think it's a great touchstone for us to think, to be more introspective about where we are, seeing the similarities, but also being able to look and realize that you're not in the soup of it. You're not in the soup of it. You're standing back a little bit now, and you can look at the same situation with a little more context. I've found quite a few people who have said to me that when the trial happened, they felt one way. They either felt he was guilty, particularly African Americans, or they felt he was innocent, and that the jury was, idiots, for lack of a better word. And after the show, they at least saw and understood that other perspective. And I've had some go, well, yeah, I now realize he was guilty, or I have some people go, oh, I now realize why the jury found reasonable doubt. And, and so I think that at the time of the trial, that wasn't going to happen. I think now I think we're at a place where that can happen. And I think the show provides a conduit for that conversation. So.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, and congratulations on your nomination. And it was a pleasure talking to you. You're welcome. Thank you.
No, it's pleasure's mine. Thanks, man.
You're welcome. Have a great one.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you.